Greetings, my name is Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin,
and we are the Dungeon Dudes. And today, we're taking a look at the really amazing changes to the Warlock in the 2024 Player's Handbook.
Warlocks have seen some incredible changes, and we're going to not just look at the class, but also the various feats and spells that might impact the way that you play the Warlock moving forward with the 2024 rules. There's a lot to discuss, so let's get rolling.
This week's episode of our show is sponsored by World Anvil. It's a fantastic piece of desktop software that is perfect for game mastering, world building, and writing.
Its best features are that it has interactive maps, chronicles which combine the capabilities of custom timelines, and maps so you can plot events across time and space in your campaigns.
World Anvil is one of the best platforms for creating a digital DM notebook that you can share with your players. You can plan, play, and present your campaign in all sorts of formats that make sense for your own brain, and then make sure that that content can be put forward to your players in a digestible format.
World Anvil supports over 45 systems, including D&D and many of the other popular ones out there. Or you can also create your own brand new systems within World Anvil.
And there's tons of templates, so game prep and building a whole world can be really, really overwhelming, but World Anvil's templates help direct your creativity so that you can fill out the details that are important, especially for your players.
It has character sheets, journals, inventory management, spell books, everything that a player might be looking for to lose themselves in their characters.
Best of all, you can use the code DungeonDudes in the links below to get 51% off a yearly subscription to World Anvil. So sign up with the links down below and try out World Anvil today.
And now, let's talk about this week's episode. We will be doing a deeper dive into the Warlock in our upcoming class guides, but for today we want to do sort of a broad overview on just what the major changes are from the 2014 rules to the 2024 rules, starting with what hasn't changed about the Warlock.
Warlocks are still an amazingly flavorful class, pact bound to an extraplanar entity who grants them their magic powers. They still have all the great spells that we love, from Hunger of Hadar, Hex to Eldritch Blast, and although they're less reliant on taking Eldritch Blast and Hex, it's still going to be a blaster staple. With their invocations, pacts, and patrons, they're very versatile, very customizable, and very adaptable.
When we look at the big picture on what has changed for the Warlocks see a tremendous boost in the form of knowing all the spells on their expanded spell list, finally. Generous improvements to their subclasses, strong revisions to their Eldritch invocations and pacts, and the ability to regain some spell slots. Overall, this means that we have a stronger and more versatile Warlock.
Bit of a controversial change is that Warlocks, like every other class in the game now, get their subclass at 3rd level. And many people have asked the question, so why do they even have powers at all without a patron?
I think that this is actually very simple to solve, and I mean, the game is about using your imagination, and my theory is that you, either one of two things, you have gained powers from an entity that is unknown to you, and it doesn't reveal itself to you until 3rd level, or you know who you're gaining the powers from, but your powers are relatively trivial until 3rd level when the true power of your patron comes online.
Yeah, it's kind of like maybe you know who your patron is at level 1, but the patron's specific powers aren't starting to manifest until you've demonstrated basic capabilities with arcane magic, right? Yeah. So considering the fact that a lot of campaigns start characters off at 3rd level anyways, levels 1 and 2 kind of go by pretty quickly, and
it's one game session most of the time.
It's 1 or 2 usually by design. I think that this is less of a flavor and role playing issue than anticipated, and I think that the 2 reasons that you came up with immediately are great. I actually just wish that the book had said that.
Yeah, I know the book could have just said you have gained powers from a patron, but they don't become readily apparent to you until 3rd level, the end.
Yeah, I feel like the implication of the book, because this is the same for clerics and sorcerers.
Yeah.
And so for me, I think the justification is the same across the board. It's like, you still know who your god is, you still know who your patron is, you still know that you have magic in your blood. It's just that it doesn't manifest its particular form until it's had a little bit of time to grow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Warlocks do now gain an Eldritch Invocation at first level. It should be pointed out that the only invocations available here are the Pacts, which are now invocations, as well as Eldritch Mind and Armor of Shadows.
So that's Blade, Tome, and Chain.
The thing that I do love here, though, is because they are now invocations, you can actually, as you level up, take multiple packs. This might not be the optimal choice, but for me, who always was like, oh, I want to be a sword-wielding warlock, but I love the Pact of the Chain so I can have a pet. Now I can be a sword-wielding warlock with a pet. I can do that if I want.
Now, the Pact of the Blade is the one that has been revised the most of all these. The Tome and the Chain are going to be pretty familiar to you of getting the familiar and getting the Tome with the extra cantrips. But the Pact of the Blade basically has been revised to be similar to the way that it works in Baldur's Gate 3. So you conjure your pact weapon, which you get to attack with using charisma instead of strength or dexterity. The pact weapon can be any weapon you want. It can be simple or martial, but it does have to be a melee weapon. So we don't have any pact bows happening here. What's cool about this is that it's now a spellcasting focus for you automatically as well, and you become proficient with the weapon. And as I said before, it's now the Hexblade thing where you get to attack using your charisma, and you can also make it into doing necrotic, psychic, or radiant damage instead of its normal damage type.
I actually think that this is really valuable for opening up. Let's be real. When the Hexblade came out, it became the most popular warlock by a long shot. And actually, although there was flavor baked into the Hexblade, it felt actually to me like we weren't even there for the flavor. We were there because we wanted to wield a sword. Yeah. And the idea of being able to grab the more flavorful options, but put a sword in their hand, like a Fiend Pact Warlock with a blade, or a Great Old One Warlock with a blade. Like these are cool concepts to me.
So here's where it gets tricky, though. First of all, Eldritch Smite is now an invocation, which you can use once per turn. So you can spend a Pact Magic slot. It has to be a Pact Magic spell slot to smite, basically. Thirsting Blade is still here, so you get the extra attack. And there's now Devouring Blade, which you can get at level 12 to get 2 extra attacks for 3 total. But you got to be careful about one thing. The new heavy weapon property has been revised, and it says that you have disadvantage on attacks with heavy weapons if you don't have a strength of at least 13. This means that if you're a blade lock and you want to use a heavy weapon for your attacks, you will need to invest ability points into strength. This is double tricky because you're not a Hexblade Warlock, so you're not getting medium armor proficiency or shield proficiency anymore. So you now have to put points into strength, which, where's it going to come from? Probably your dexterity.
Yeah.
And you've got bad armor. Yeah.
So that gets tricky. No longer are we going to be like glaive locks.
Well, it's a trade-off. And it's also worth noting that the Pact of the Blade does not give you the mastery property of that weapon or a fighting style.
This might mean that a one-level dip into fighter is a really, really good choice. Because then you get all of that. You get your martial weapons, everything. You get your armor, you get your weapon masteries, you get your fighting style. Warlocks are going to really love it. If you're going Pact to the Blade, that one-level dip into fighter might be the secret sauce. Agonizing Blast and Forceful Blast now work on any Warlock cantrip of your choice, not just Eldritch Blast. They are still best with Eldritch Blast, though, so you're probably still going to take Eldritch Blast.
Warlocks actually do get 10 invocations total now, up from 8, and you get pretty front-loaded on them. You actually get 5 invocations by 5th level. So you get a lot to do. I also like that there's a new invocation called Lessons of the First One, which just gives you a flat-out extra origin feat if you want it.
Cool.
Yeah.
And another great feature for the Warlocks is at level 2, you can regain up to half your spell slots by focusing for a minute. So even at like 2nd level, you get an extra spell slot.
I'm just going to come out and say that I feel like they just should have boosted the number of spell slots flat out. Like, we did that with our apothecary class, which uses the same kind of chassis as the warlock, and I still think that they just should have boosted them up to having 6 spell slots total by the end of the progression.
That's fair. They have a new 9th level feature called Contact Patron. It lets you use Contact Other Plane to phone your patron and have a little chat. I like that this ability is left completely ambiguous on what the purposes of this are and what you're going to learn from your patron. Maybe you can ask them how they're doing, what their favorite pizza topping is, what boys they have a crush on. Or, maybe you can ask them useful information like where your foes are, where the treasure is, or the secrets of the universe. But this is a fun little new feature that gives you a one-way direct phone call to your patron.
So if you're playing the straight up blaster caster warlock, I think that most of the feats that casters know and love, like Warcaster, are going to be your go-tos for the new warlock.
Fey Touch and Shadow Touch. Spell Sniper looks good.
Spell Sniper actually is pretty good here, although it doesn't quite let you do the insane range that Eldritch Blast used to have. Eldritch Spear is still here as an invocation, but it's and it does increase the range by 30 times your Warlock level. So it's a pretty big range increase that you can combine with those.
Yeah, and again, if you're playing the Blade Lock, if you want to take Great Weapon Master or Polearm Master, you're going to need a Strength of 13. We talked about that, so just be aware of that and talk about that 1 level dip into Fighter again.
Yeah, and that actually creates another interesting issue that the Blade Lock ends up having to deal with, because Great Weapon Master and Polearm Master boost Strength, right? So, but here's the interesting way that you kind of get some benefit from it. If you start your first level as your character as Fighter and have Strength 13, you then multi-class into Warlock after that. And then what's going to happen is you're going to take Great Weapon Master and Polearm Master, and that is going to boost your Strength to 15, which you actually want eventually, because you want Strength 15 to wear plate armor.
Yeah.
And so, but what's going to happen then now is you've taken a bunch of your feats and you haven't been able to boost your charisma yet. So your charisma is still the 17 that you started off with, so you're going to be waiting till like 13th level before you're actually boosting your charisma, which it's kind of like you wanted to be attacking with charisma, but you're going to have to wait to max out your charisma. Like,
I feel, okay, so what I'm starting to see here is there is still a viable case for a armor-wearing Blade Lock, but it's a unique build, and it's no longer the only reason to play a Warlock, which I actually think is a benefit.
Yeah.
We've boosted up a lot of the magic, and we're about to talk about the subclasses, which have all been raised up a bit. And so I think that playing the Warlock the way they were initially intended is a more viable option, and the Blade Lock Hexblade, which no longer exists, kind of being brought down a peg evens the whole barrel, I think.
Yeah, it's still a tricky choice of how you spread the ability scores out.
Yeah.
Because what you want to be able to do is just go full into charisma and not have to care about any other stat. But it actually, you can only do that if you want to use non-heavy weapons.
Yeah. Which, I mean, you could be a dual wielder. Or I guess you only get one packed weapon, though.
Yeah, exactly. You only get one packed weapon.
So this feels more like a Blade Singer Wizard, where it's like you have a sword, but you're mostly a spellcaster.
Yes, right?
Yeah.
And so technically you could do this with a long sword or a versatile weapon that becomes a D10.
Yeah.
But you're not getting the reach now. So it seems like a build problem that can be solved, but you're going to have to choose what are the trade-offs that you want.
Yeah. Talking about the spells, Eldritch Blast is still awesome. You're probably going to take it. Hunger of Hadar now gains extra damage when upcast. Yay! I don't know why that was not a thing in the 2014 rules. It upset me endlessly. So rejoice. We have upcasting damage.
It also still makes strange slurping noises.
Yay!
Warlocks also have access to many of the awesome summon spells, which they had in Tasha's, but Summon, Fey, Undead, Aberration, and Fiend are all here. One thing to note that is a takeaway is many invocations which let Warlocks cast a certain spell once per day using a spell slot are gone. So Warlocks actually have no ability to cast Bestow Curse, Slow, or Polymorph at all. The invocations for At Will Disguise Self and Invisibility and Mage Armor and stuff like that, those are still here, but like you used to be able to kind of like pick up some extra spells through
That didn't
invocations.
require you blowing through your 2 spell slots.
No, they were weird because
some of them
they
did.
gave you the spell known. You were able to cast it once per day, and you still had to use a spell slot. So they were like really costly invocations.
Though I never liked those ones anyway. So
I didn't like them, but I just would have expected them to put Slow, Polymorph, and Bestow Curse on the Warlock spell list,
Yeah.
and I don't know why they didn't.
As we talk about the subclasses, the Celestial appears along with the Fey, Fiend, and the Great Old One.
Great dichotomy there.
Yeah.
Celestial Fiends, Heaven and Hell.
You really get to see this sort of Warlocks aren't inherently evil, which is something that kind of you felt in the flavor. It's like, yeah, you can be a Fiend Warlock, but like the Celestial and the Fey feel less, I mean, especially the Celestial.
Yeah. But I think everyone's just going to be a Great Old One Warlock. Hail Cthulhu.
The Great Old One Warlock is probably my favorite glow up that we have seen. They have incredible thematic improvements. They can change damage to psychic for any Warlock spell. And on top of that, any enchantment or illusion spell they now cast, they can cast without verbal or somatic components. At first, that may seem like a small change, but if somebody casts silence on you, that's not going to stop you. And no one has to know that your suggestion was a spell at all.
And at 10th level, they get to use Hex to debuff saving throws, which everyone thinks that Hex debuffs saving throws. It doesn't, but theirs does.
And now their Create Thrall ability is even better. It lets you summon an aberration that doesn't require concentration, and it lasts for 1 minute, and it also benefits from your Hex spell. I think this is better than just like mind controlling some guard, way more useful.
The Archfey can now cast Misty Step without using a spell slot a number of times equal to their spellcasting modifier, and they get extra effects like temporary hit points or turning invisible or damaging targets or taunting foes when they do cast Misty Step, and eventually they get to Misty Step as part of casting any other enchantment or illusion spell. So you're just like bamfing everywhere. Yeah, which is great. And this is relevant because you're casting Misty Step without using a spell slot, you can Misty Step to teleport and then cast one of your other Warlock spells. It doesn't have to just be Eldritch Blast.
Yeah. The Fiend Pact, or the Fiend Patron Warlock is still your optimal Blaster Warlock. All of the goodies are here. You want to rain fire on your enemies, be a Fiend Warlock.
And the Celestial is probably a decent healer.
The Celestial did add Summon Celestial to their spell list, which I think is probably essential.
Yeah, although I'm going to have to look through the Warlock spell list to actually see how many radiant damage spells they actually have, because I feel like there's not a lot of options for radiant damage.
I think the Great Old One came out the big winner here.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
It is the best one.
So as we come to the bottom line, let's look at this whole thing. I personally think that baking the Hexblade features that we were all here for anyway into the base Pact of the Blade is a brilliant choice. I personally am thrilled by the idea of playing a sword-wielding Warlock, but with a pact to the Fiend or the Great Old One. I think that Warlocks have unshackled themselves from much of the typecasting they got in the 2014 rules. There was this sense of versatility in the Warlock in 2014, but in reality, they fell into very specific lanes depending on your subclass and which pact you picked. For example, very rarely would you not take Eldritch Blast, or very rarely would you take Hexblade and not take Pact of the Blade. Now I feel like we actually have a lot more versatility and open-ended building concepts coming to mind as we look over the 2024 Warlock. And I'm more excited to play one than I ever have been before.
I agree. Like, I think that the Great Old One Warlock, the classic Warlock build with Eldritch Blast, Hex, and also having the Repelling Blast and the Forceful Blast, and just chucking people into Hunger of Hadar is gonna be awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
still the classic play, but I do feel like you can dabble now.
You certainly can. You can change it up. I think it's really cool that you can have the chain, the tome, and the blade all together too.
Yeah.
I think that you might actually see a lot of people go tome plus chain or chain plus blade.
I like the chain is always there because everybody wants.
Everyone wants a pet.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like and having like a little minion is fun. I really think that having the extra invocations is pretty sweet overall. Especially for the more caster oriented warlocks, because it's going to make it really easy to get the repelling blast, to get the agonizing blast, and then grabbing other things that are fun that you want to have along here, like maybe Armor of Shadows or Devil's Sight or Eldritch Mind. All of these are still here. Doing the Devil's Sight and Darkness thing is pretty cool. It's still here. Doing that with the Blade Pact is going to be great.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of really cool build options. I'm a little less optimistic though about like the straight up heavy weapon wielding Blade Pact.
Yeah, I think that we're kind of letting go of the big weapon, big armor Warlock, and we're settling back into the initial interpretation of the Warlock as a blaster spellcaster manipulator. Very much, a lot of the subclasses you'll notice lean into enchantment and illusion, and I feel like Warlocks in general lean on the side of like sort of the tricksy manipulator spellcaster blaster.
I just think it's just going to be challenging for them, because I think that I even noticed with Joe's Warlock Wrath, his AC was always really bad. Yeah. And I think Warlocks, like the Blade Warlocks in particular, are going to be like, oh, what am I going to do about this AC problem? It's not as clear cut how to juggle your ability scores. And it is one of those things of like, if I have to invest a 15 in my strength anyways, like, I'm almost a paladin at that point.
I mean, you can still play the Warlock Paladin.
You still can. Well, you have to use your Warlock slots for Eldritch Smite. Eldritch Smite isn't a bonus action either. It's just the classic Smite. And it is only once per turn. But yeah, Eldritch Smite combined with Divine Smite, you can actually stack those together.
Yeah. So, with all of this is, I think, our last overview that we're doing. Tell us your thoughts on the Warlock and the changes that are being made here. Are you excited to play a Warlock? I'm excited to play a great old one at some point. I always loved the flavor, and now I feel like they have the mechanics to match. What are you excited about with the new 2024 Warlock? Let us know in the comments below.
The videos that we create on our channel are made possible thanks to the incredible generosity of our Patreon supporters. Seriously, becoming a patron of the show is the best way that you can show your support for us. It really helps us create all the content that we put out here on YouTube for free.
And if you want to see an awesome Great Old One Warlock in play, you can check out our actual play in the Worlds of Drakenheim, which airs Tuesday evenings right here on YouTube. You can check out all the previous episodes right up over here.
And we got plenty of coverage of all the other class changes in the 2024 Player's Handbook. It's all up over here.
Please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and ring that bell so that you never miss an episode.
Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time
in the dungeon.